Hello and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast from Agriland that keeps you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Charles O'Donnell and I'm joined today by Agriland journalists Aisling O'Brien and Louise Hickey. Despite the prolonged spell of bad weather we've had, we are nonetheless gradually getting closer and closer to silage season. Around this time of year, the Association of Farm and Forestry Contractors in Ireland, the FCI, publishes its annual contractor cost guide, which outlines guidance prices that farmers might expect to pay for contracting services over the year. And this year's guide was published just this Thursday. Have the FCI indicated any major changes this year, Aisling?
Yes, Charles. Well, given the fact that the cost of everything seems to be increasing at the moment, it's not going to come as a surprise to farmers that contractors are increasing some of their prices this year. Now, some of the prices that appear on this list are the same as they were back in 2023, but others have increased up to a maximum of 4%, which the FCI says is a modest increase. Now, from the outset, the FCI has stressed that the guide shouldn't be considered as definitive in terms of what a farmer should expect to pay a contractor, but they said it does provide fair and reasonable guidance for both the contractors and their clients out there. Now, the charges might vary between regions, of course, across soil types, the distance that a contractor might have to travel, the size and the type of the equipment used. So, it obviously the figures that we have listed on Agriland, are just a guide, but I suppose it's what you can hopefully expect to pay somewhere in or around that figure. And interestingly, as an increasing number of farmers are moving towards being VAT registered, two figures are actually given for each item on the list this year, one including VAT and one excluding VAT. So according to the FCI, the 2024 charge guide reflects slight increases, and the charge guide lists 102 items compared to 98 last year. And the FCI National Chair, John Hughes, said that there was increasing costs of new machinery that is impacting contractors out there, and machinery costs have risen by more than 30%, Charles, in the past 3 years. And spare parts, the prices for those as well have continued to increase as well for contractors. And there's also additional costs facing contractors this year. There's an increase in the national minimum wage as well. And they also will be required to provide pension funding for employees as well. So that has to be taken into consideration. And there is an excise duty increase coming on fuel as well. We'll speak about that in a little bit more detail in a while. That's also something that the contractors will be contending against. And this year's guide also noted as well a notable scarcity of young people who are joining the sector. So I suppose, look, we'll give a couple of prices, Charles. The full list, we're not going to go through it all here today on the podcast, but just maybe some to pick out. I suppose for baling, wrapping, stacking and moving, it's between €14.50 and €23 a bale. For round hay bales, it's between €6.50 and €7.50. Hay cutting, rowing and turning is between €12.50 and €27.50 an acre. And for round straw bales, you can expect a guide price of between €6.50 and €14.50 as well. Looking at silage, I'd say many farmers out there are scratching their heads looking at very sodden fields out there. But needless to say, we'll have to be looking ahead to first cut silage as well. So the guide price the FCI have produced for this year says that mowing will in or around cost between €26 and €27 an acre. Raking, tedding and rowing will be between €15 and €16.50 an acre as well. And topping grassland would be €22 an acre or €57 an hour for a guide price as well. Looking at maybe fertilizer application for bulk spreading, it would be €45 a tonne or €96 an hour. To spread lime, it would be between $8.50 and $10.50 a tonne. And for slurry spreading, the guide gives a price range of €67 to €104 an hour, depending on the tanker size. And for umbilical spreading, it could range from €160 to €170 an hour. Look, there's a full list on Agriland as well of these FCI guide charges. And again, just to stress, Charles, these are our guide charges, but some increases this year for farmers, unsurprisingly.
Yeah, absolutely, Ashling. And if we think back to the year 2022, which was a very difficult year for everyone, the FCI actually had to publish more than one of these cost guides over the course of that year in order to reflect the sheer increases in prices across the board that occurred. Hopefully, obviously, there won't be a repeat of that this year. But a lot of these prices seem to be going well, they're certainly not going down and seem to be only going in one direction.
Yeah, well, I suppose if you look at the cost of everything at the moment, Charles, everything has just got so much more expensive out there as well. And look, we're looking as well at the fuel excise hikes, that the government are set to roll out as well. And the contractors did point to that as well. Of course, back in 2022, as you mentioned, I suppose the war did break out in Ukraine after Russia invaded, and the government's response to that was to cut the excise duties applied to fuels like petrol, diesel, and green diesel as well. But it was on a temporary basis. And last October, listeners might cast their mind back to budget 2024, which seems like a distant memory, but it's coming back to haunt us now, unfortunately, because the Minister for Finance then said that the temporary excise rate reductions would end at the end of this month, at the end of March, and that there would be 4 increases in excise duty over the next 12 months, with the first of those coming on April 1st. So on that date, there'll be an increase of 4 cent a litre on petrol, 3 cent a litre on diesel, and 1.5 cent a litre on marked gas oil, or green diesel as it's commonly known. And then there'll be a further increase in August for us to look forward to as well. 4 cent a litre on petrol, 3 cent a litre on diesel, and again, 1.5 cent a litre on green diesel as well. Look, ahead of the first increase as well, Charles, opposition TDs coming out and urging the government to postpone or to maybe review these increases, given the fact that, as I said, the cost of everything seems to be rising, and people, whether they're in rural Ireland or in urban settings, this is going to pinch at the pumps as well. And the Sinn Féin agriculture spokesperson, Claire Curran, said farmers and contractors are going to be preparing for the silage season, as we just mentioned. And she said that many farmers out there are already facing soaring input costs and can't really afford to take more price hikes as well. And she also made the point that a lot of people living in rural Ireland as well, you mightn't have public transport links as well. So you have to rely on your car to get to work if you're, in a farm setting and you've an off-farm job. Or if you're just living in a part of rural Ireland and you're not a farmer, you do rely on your car that bit more as well. And that was something that the president of the Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association, the ICSA, Sean McNamara, also highlighted this week as well. But Claire Curran did say that fuel prices have risen by more than 30% in the past 3 years. And, she said that making fuel even more expensive, at this time is the wrong call. And independent TD Carl Nolan got involved as well this week. But she said to Agriland that the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar has actually ruled out pausing these hikes or reviewing them at least until the next budget. But the Taoiseach did say that the government would be monitoring prices over the coming months, which Deputy Nolan said would come as cold comfort to everybody out there. And she pointed to data from the Consumers Association of Ireland that the yield from VAT, excise duty, and other levies on motor fuels amounted to around €6 billion last year. And she said that should allow for a degree of flexibility from the government when it comes to this issue. But at the moment, the government doesn't seem for turning on it.
Yeah, and Aisling, you alluded to something there very important as well. Obviously, it's important from an agricultural point of view with the green diesel, but from the rural point of view, when, as you said, you're reliant on the car, there's no public transport, nothing is really within walking distance, and you just have the car, fuel costs can add up fairly quickly in those circumstances.
Absolutely, rapidly, and it is an extra consideration for people. It can become prohibitive for people running a car. They might have to think about, their work situation as well, Charles. All of these increases do add up over time. And look, we have the Green Party in particular are, always talking about rolling out public transport in rural areas. But is that happening fast enough? And I'm sure many people listening to this podcast, will have family members or them themselves trying to access their work. And the thoughts of cycling or walking to access work just isn't an option. And maybe bus or train links don't add up to their work times as well. So, definitely any increase in fuel price is going to hit hard.
And Aisling, staying on the topic of costs, and certain other costs for farmers are set to increase as well downstream from the contractor when you have your baling and silage done for the year and you have plastic to dispose of.
Yeah, Charles, I feel like I'm the bearer of a lot of bad news this week on the podcast, unfortunately. Further news of price hikes from the Irish Farm Film Producers Group, the IFFPG. They confirmed that there will be a series of increases for the recycling of farm plastic costs this year. Now, the IFFPG, it's a national not-for-profit recycling compliance scheme, and it aims to protect Ireland's rural environment. It's 70% funded through the recycling levy, which is charged to companies placing plastics products on the market. And the remaining 30% then comes through a weight-based collection charge to farmers out there. So all plastic collected by IFFPG is done through a network of 4 approved contractors and also through bring centres as well. So the minimum charge at the bring centres this year will be €50 per half tonne, with every half tonne thereafter being charged at €50 as well. That is an increase of €15 when compared with the minimum charge of €35 per half tonne at bring centres last year. Now, if a farmer chooses to opt for on-farm collection, the minimum call-out charge this year will be €100. That's up significantly from €60 last year. And IFFPG said that would cover the cost of recycling around half a tonne of farm plastic waste, or the plastic from around 250 bales thereabouts. So the cost for every half tonne thereafter presented for recycling through on-farm collection will be €100. Now, the group also confirmed that the recycling levy that we mentioned earlier, that is charged to companies who place farm plastic products on the market, is increasing as well this year, up from €240 a tonne to €286 a tonne. So quite a significant increase there as well. And Liam Maloney, the general manager of IFFPG, spoke with us this week on Agriland, and he said that the recycling levy has increased a number of times in recent years due to the ever-increasing volumes of farm plastic waste at a time of escalating recycling costs due to global events. He said that the decision of China to ban plastic waste imports, the COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine all have conspired essentially to increase the cost of recycling by around 600%. Now, look, the initiative has been very successful. During the last 6 years, the volume of farm plastic waste recycled has increased by 50% to the current 39,000 tonnes per annum. And that represents a recycling rate of over 90% and is the equivalent of plastic from 20 million silage bales. So it's quite a lot of plastic that's being brought forward for recycling, which is a good thing because the government's recycling target is 70%. So IFFPG is surpassing that target as things stand. But I did ask Liam Maloney if increasing the prices could lead to maybe an increase in illegal dumping, perhaps, or burning of waste or plastic on farms. And he said that he didn't think that the increase in price would impact recycling levels. He said for most Irish farmers, recycling has become a mainstream activity that they engage in routinely, and that 90% of farmers choose their local bring centre as the most convenient and cost-effective means of managing that waste stream as well. So look, unfortunately, another cost increase there, Charles. And look, I'm sure it probably will impact the cost of silage wrap as well this year, because if the producers who are putting the product on the market in the first instance are seeing an increase in their recycling levy, no doubt that possibly will be passed on to farmers as well. And then at the far side, when you're trying to get rid of that wrap, you're going to have to pay extra to recycle it as well. So being caught on both sides, unfortunately, for farmers in this one.
Yeah, Aisling, for sure, those costs are not, those increases are not small ones. But what's amazing, Aisling, is when I speak to farmers just out and about, it's amazing that it's just taken for granted that you would recycle farm plastics. It's a cost that and it's to their credit, I suppose. It's a cost that doesn't even seem to be questioned that much.
Yeah, which is great. And it shows, I suppose, how farmers want to be environmentally friendly. They want to recycle this plastic. Nobody wants to see plastic wrap hanging off ditches and, being buried or burned on farms. And we can see it from the amount of recycling that is being done, 39,000 tons. It's a huge amount of plastic being recycled, and it's a huge credit to farmers. But unfortunately, it is going to get more expensive at the moment. And you'd wonder where all these cost increases are going to end, whether it's fuel or contracting or even recycling of farm plastic this week.
Well, I suppose, Aisling, a lot of these costs would come down if the weather would take a turn for the better, but it has been persistently wet for a long time now. And in a familiar story for farmers, wet weather means animals were housed earlier than they normally would be at the end of last year and are now delayed in getting back out on grass. And as a result, fodder supplies are running low in many parts of the country. In fact, reports from beef farmers across the country indicated that very little grazing will be achieved before St. Patrick's Day, though some farmers in certain parts of the country with drier soil conditions may have been more fortunate and may have got grazing started before St. Patrick's Day. Louise, you visited the farm of ICMSA Deputy President Eamon Carroll in Tipperary. How is he coping with fodder at the moment?
Yes, Charles, I caught up with Eamon Carroll about his tightening fodder supplies, which is a story that's all too familiar at the minute with farmers right across the country. Carroll said that in the last few weeks he received multiple calls from farmers about cost concerns in the future and that the long-term ramifications are really going to be felt through the year. Here's a little bit about what he had to say concerning his own situation.
Our own experience for the first time ever, we've actually ran out of fodder. That never happened to us in our entire life. So why is that? It isn't that we have increased numbers or anything like that. It is predominantly down to, weather events last year. Last year was a very challenging year in terms of trying to grow grass. We got good weather in the month of June, but after that it has been raining nearly constantly since.
So we heard the ICMSA Vice President there saying that this is the first time he has ever run out of fodder. And that's not down to a lack of organisation, but mainly weather events in the last number of months. He said that usually he would have cattle out until the end of November, but in the last year gone by, Eamon's cattle were actually in a month later than usual. He let cattle out about 2 weeks ago, but said if rain persists, that all the animals would have to be housed again. Now, Eamon is based in Thurles in County Tipperary, and he actually said that further down the south of the country, the situation's even worse. He told us that government financial support is needed, and he said that in that support, one thing he does not want to see is funding supporting one sector over another. It's important to note that it's really every sector that's been affected. While dairy farmers tend to get cows out for a few hours when ground conditions allow, it's generally not as feasible for suckler and beef farms. But as Carroll said, the tillage sector is affected too. He said that there's been anything in between 10 to 90% of winter crops not sown. As farmers will know all too well, conditions can change quickly in March and April, and if a few relatively dry days arrive, farmers may well be in a position to get at least some cattle out to grass.
And Louise, conditions are so unfavourable right now that there's even been calls on the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine to suspend farm inspections for the time being, isn't there?
Yes, so the Irish Farmers Association Deputy President Alice Doyle said that with the ongoing weather conditions, farmers are coming under serious pressure, and she has appealed to everybody in the sector who interacts with farmers to take this into account. She said for the Department of Agriculture it could mean stepping down from inspections for the moment and also redoubling their efforts to ensure the timely payment of funds from farm schemes. IFA Farm, Family and Social Affairs Chair Teresa Roach is also asking farmers to support their neighbours and offer help if it's needed. She has also encouraged any farmers feeling isolated to seek support. MACRA is also calling on Minister Charlie McConalogue to address fodder security challenges, though through reconvening the National Security and Fodder Resilience Committee. MACRA President Elaine Houlihan has written to the Minister on the issue. She said that farmers are facing difficult decisions regarding fodder supplies, grassland management, future fodder stocks and cereal planting.
Thanks, Louise. Moving on now, and as well as silage season, we're also quickly approaching peak milk supply. And it's that time of the year that those milk prices from the dairy processors really have a huge bearing on dairy farm finances, regardless of size. Where do we stand after the latest monthly round of prices, Aisling?
Yes, Charles, as you say, dairy farmers out there keeping a very, very close eye on processors as they announced the milk prices for February supplies over the past week. Lakeland Dairies increased its base price by 1.5 cent a litre to 41.4 cent a litre in the Republic, which includes a new half a cent a litre sustainability incentive payment. In a statement, the processor said that global dairy markets remain in a delicate position with the supply demand dynamic tentatively poised. And they said that buyers are continuing to adopt a cautious approach, but demand, thankfully, remains reasonably solid, driven by weaker production both in New Zealand and in Europe. And they said as we approach the critical spring season in Europe, milk supply is expected to remain sluggish, which should help in providing stability in the market. But they did say that geopolitical tensions and supply chain disruptions and global economic headwinds do remain a concern as well. Looking at Kerry Group, it increased its price to 40 cent a litre, up a half a cent a litre from January. That consists of a base price of 38 cent a litre and a milk contract payment of a 2 cent a litre on all qualifying milk volumes. In its statement, it said that dairy buyers remain cautious, but global consumer demand is improving, which should lead to improved dairy demand. For Tirlawn milk suppliers, there was a 2 cent a litre increase as well. The Kilkenny headquartered processor will pay a total of 42.08 cent a litre, including VAT, for February milk. That price includes a seasonality payment of 3 cent a litre, including VAT, that will be paid on all creamery milk volumes supplied in February that meet quality criteria. And the base price there from Tirlawn is 38.58 cent a litre as well. And the processor noted that weather conditions, just as Louise was discussing, have made life very challenging on some farms out there, Charles, with yields per cow 10% lower than the same period last year. So definitely a cause for concern for farmers impacted by the weather out there. Dairygold increased its milk price by 2 cent a litre to 40 cent a litre, which is inclusive of sustainability and quality bonuses and VAT. In addition, the processor will pay a February early calving bonus of 2.1 cent a litre on milk supplied in February. Therefore, you could attain a price with Dairygold of 42.1 cent a litre for February if you met all of that criteria. Looking at Carberry, there was an increase there in the base milk price of 2 cent a litre. And it's also continuing to support milk price from its stability fund with a contribution of 1.5 cent a litre. And if that decision is replicated across the 4 West Cork co-ops, it would result in an average price of 41.67 cent a litre. And this milk price for February is including a SCC somatic cell count, of course, bonus as well. And there's a future-proof sustainability bonus and a stability fund support as well built into that price. Arrivo increased its base milk price by 0.75 cent a litre when compared to January, meaning that suppliers will be offered a base price of 39 cent a litre. And Arrivo said that manufacturing milk will receive an additional early calving bonus of 3.15 cent a litre, bringing the base to 42.15 cent a litre. Arabon finally announced that it's increasing the price paid to members for milk supplied last month by 1 cent, up to 38.9 cent a litre. Arabon also paying a 3 cent a litre winter bonus on February milk supplies. So look, great to see prices going up across the board. I'd say farmers would be looking for a lot more than what they're getting at the moment, but it's heading in the right direction as we're approaching peak. So that is a good thing, Charles. And just judging from the comments made by the processors, it seems that the markets look like they could be favourable to us, hopefully, for the coming months.
Yeah, hopefully, Aisling, and we'll certainly keep an eye on it going forward over the next coming weeks, which are crucial. But finally for today, Aisling, some national news to talk about, and in something that for the majority of the population came completely out of nowhere. Leo Varadkar has resigned as Taoiseach and leader of Fine Gael. Now, for a man who by his own admission wasn't an expert on agriculture, he certainly generated plenty of talk in the sector.
He absolutely did. He went through a lot of careful consideration and some soul searching this week to shock the majority of the nation. It has to be said, Charles. Even the political correspondents in the hallowed halls of Leinster House, a lot of them were taken by surprise by this as well. He's nothing lined up at the moment. He's telling us he'll stay as Taoiseach until we get a new Fine Gael leader. And that is going to happen in advance of the party's Ardèche, which is taking place on April 6th. And that will allow for a new Taoiseach to be elected when the Dáil resumes after the Easter break. The money at the moment seems to be on Simon Harris. He seems to be the front runner at the moment to replace Leo Varadkar. The 37-year-old from Wicklow is currently the Minister for Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science. So it looks like his to lose at the moment, Charles. That seems to be the way it's looking. But definitely a big shock that Leo Varadkar left. And we did contact farming organisations to get their reactions. And the Irish Farmers Association president, Francie Gorman, wished Leo Varadkar well and said that during his time as Taoiseach, he kept agricultural concerns front and centre, in his opinion. And the IFA president said that the biggest issue that Leo Varadkar faced when he became Taoiseach back in 2017, of course, was the outcome of the Brexit vote a year earlier and ensuring that agricultural interests were protected in the negotiations and the fallout after that Brexit vote. And Francie Gorman said Leo Varadkar understood the concerns of farmers. He kept them front and centre in the prolonged talks that culminated in the trade agreement that was struck in 2020. And he said that he found Leo Varadkar open and accessible to discussions. And of course, Leo Varadkar attended the IFA AGM just back in January at Farm Centre. And he said that he was willing to engage with IFA delegates as well, Francie Gorman told us. And at the AGM as well, Leo Varadkar did speak about the role that farmers would play with climate change. And he said that farmers would be part of the solution. The Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association, the ICMSA, said that it hopes that a change of Taoiseach would result in a change of direction for the government's policy when it comes to agriculture. The ICMSA president, Dennis Drennan, spoke to us this week after Leo Varadkar's announcement, and they said that he had regularly made himself available to meet with farm organisations. Leo Varadkar also attended the ICMSA AGM. But it has to be said that despite the Taoiseach being available, Charles, it wasn't clear if any of those meetings had an actual impact. And he said behind all that, he might have been available to us, but I'm not sure he was listening to us because the current government policies are really undermining farming. And you'd hope that if there is a new leader elected, that they might change the direction of the government. As farmers, we can do a lot more for the environment and for the economy of the country, but we need support to help us do that and not be regulated out of existence, was Dennis Drennan's comments. And the Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association president, Sean McNamara, said he was shocked by Leo Varadkar's announcement and he wished him well. But in their experience in the ICSA, he didn't give him a great rating because he said that they had asked to meet Leo Varadkar several times and he didn't meet the ICSA. And he said that he didn't believe that Leo Varadkar knew anything about the hardship that farmers are going through. And he said it was a matter of telling farmers what to do, and that was it. And perhaps not really showing a lot of flexibility with what was coming from Europe in terms of legislation. Now, there was talk about would this trigger a general election? Obviously, the opposition are calling for a general election as well. A lot of politicking going on at the moment, Charles, understandably. But Sean McNamara felt it was doubtful that we'd get a general election out of this, but you can't rule that possibility out entirely at the moment. But he was clear in what he felt farmers wanted from the next leader of the country and the next Taoiseach. And he said the way he'd look at it, we want a Taoiseach that's prepared to see beyond the M50. And as somebody down here in Kerry, anybody who can find their way beyond the Red Cow roundabout is a friend of ours. So if it's Simon Harris or somebody else, I'd say we'd be looking for them, as Sean McNamara said, to look beyond that glorious motorway that surrounds Dublin and to make sure that the concerns of farmers in rural Ireland are seen after as well.
Well, we can only wait and see, Aisling, and it remains to be seen where Leo Varadkar goes from here. But of course, with Eddie Punch moving on as General Secretary of the ICSA, one possible opportunity there, but we'll see. Unfortunately though, that's all we have time for today. Please don't forget to rate, review and follow The Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love if you could spare some time to give us 5 stars and share The Farming Week with anyone you think might be interested. From Aisling, Louise and myself, all the best for the weekend.